What's good, YouTubes? Steph here, and welcome to Theta Space. Any plans I had for this Wednesday's video went out the door when I got the news that legendary Yes frontman Jon Anderson has just dropped a solo album with the band Geeks last week, because I'm going to review it while it's still fresh. So this is Theta Space First. I'm reviewing an album that is not years, if not decades old. The album is True by Jon Anderson with the band Geeks, released just last week, August 23rd, 2024. Most prog rock fans know who Jon Anderson is. He was the original lead vocalist with Yes, and many consider him the only true Yes frontman, although Trevor Horn, John Davison, and Benoit David have all occupied that spot at some point or another in the band's history. Jon Anderson will be 80 years old this coming October, and it's amazing how well his voice has held up after all this time. Although he doesn't abuse his throat like, say, most heavy metal singers, Anderson's vocals are usually light and airy and pitched in the alto range, which is pretty high for a man. The band Geeks are a project started by multi-instrumentalist and singer Richie Castellano, who has been a member of Blue Oyster Cult for over 20 years now. I first noticed the band Geeks on the YouTube some while ago, maybe about a year or so, with a cover of Close to the Edge. They had a woman singing lead, making it easier to cover Anderson's range. But what really struck me was how well the players seemed to have classic Yes in their bones. If I closed my eyes during the instrumental parts, I could swear I was listening to the actual album track. Apparently, Anderson noticed this group on the YouTubes as well and reached out to them because they've recently been touring together and playing sets of classic Yes songs. And they've also put an album together, which, as I mentioned, dropped a week ago. The album is called True, and it's credited to Jon Anderson and the band Geeks, the material having been written by all of the participants as far as I can tell, according to a behind-the-scenes video that Castellano put up on his channel last week. I'll link that in the description. I learned that this album had dropped when I saw Pete Pardo's review of it on Wednesday last week, although I think I had heard about it being in the works a little earlier than that. So the next day, I pulled it up on one of the major streaming services that I don't care to name unless they want to pay me, and started listening to it a few times. From the time I was in 9th grade into my 30s, Yes was my favorite band, but I haven't bothered to follow them for a while. The last full album that I listened to was 90125, which was released in 1984, and to my thinking is not proper Yes anyway. Later, I picked up the Keys to Ascension albums, but mostly for the live material. Even though the new studio material was by the renowned Howe Wakeman White lineup, I thought it was pretty disappointing. The best of it was just okay, and the worst of it was truly the worst. I've only listened to a few other tracks that have come out since to make my video ranking the epic tracks, running 15 minutes or longer, and I haven't heard the latest album, Mirror to the Sky, which incidentally has no founding members remaining. What I've heard about the Yes catalog since the 80s, and my experience with the Keys studio material, as well as AWBH, has not encouraged me to go out of my way to hear more of those records. And here begins my review proper. First, as Pardo mentioned, the album cover art is atrocious, but there have been and will almost certainly continue to be albums of great music with less than stellar graphic presentations. It's about the music to me, not the pictures. And so, to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. Overall, for the most part, this sounds like classic 70s Yes. And as I said, the band Geeks really know their Yes, and they've internalized the styles of the classic members. The parts really sound like the way Howe, Wakeman, or Squire would probably play them. And of course, you've got the classic voice of Yes, Jon Anderson himself, giving it that extra bit of authenticity. True opens strong with True Messenger. It's relatively short, just under 6 minutes, but Anderson and the band really establish their space here and make their case that they can stand up as an equal to the old band. The next track, the 4.25 minute Shine On, continues in the same vein. The music sounds like it could be outtakes from Going for the One or Tornado, an alternate universe version of Tornado that doesn't suck. No, actually it sounds more like the Keys to Ascension material, except that where Keys comes off like a phoned-in pastiche of classic 70s Yes, these songs feel fresh and vital with a sense of real joy in the writing and the playing. The next track is the semi-epic Counties and Countries, my favorite track on the album, but not quite an epic as it doesn't even make 10 minutes. It exceeds 9 minutes though. Build Me an Ocean is a nice song, a slow, mellow ballad. It feels more like a John Anderson solo track than something by Yes. Still a Friend is another good track, and it's followed by Make It Right and Realization Part 2. I didn't understand why Realization was Part 2 until my fourth or fifth listen. It segues from Make It Right without a pause, and it ends with Let This Be Heaven, Let This Be Life, the same lyric that opens Make It Right. But even with those aspects, this doesn't feel like one song in two parts to me. Make It Right is another track that's more like an Anderson solo track than a Yes track. It's a slow, gentle ballad. And Realization picks up the tempo and isn't musically similar to Make It Right, apart from having a stripped-down, somewhat sparse arrangement. The short Thank God closes this album. It's another one that feels more like an Anderson solo song. But it comes after the big 16-minute epic Once Upon a Dream. If this were a Yes track and I were ranking it in my previous video, I would put it right in the middle, above Ritual but below Awaken. Many would probably disagree, but I mentioned before that I don't hold Ritual in the same regard as most Yes fans, and my favorite track from Topographic Oceans is The Awakening. So I said this sounds like 70s Yes, but being a product of its time, solidly in the 21st century, the production can't help having that modern sound, so it's more in the vein of the Keys to Ascension material, which I went back and listened to as well to make an accurate comparison with this album. I still think Keys seems phoned in. My take is that the band was trying to write material like the old classics, but ended up with formulaic by-the-numbers songs like they were following a checklist. I've said in my earlier video that Mind Drive sounds like what an AI would come up with if you told it to compose a classic Yes epic. Seriously, the vibe and feel of Once Upon a Dream had me thinking this was what Mind Drive could be if it had been composed with enthusiasm and passion. So, comparing it with the 70s Yes albums, True is no Close to the Edge or Relayer. It's not even the Yes album. I would put it about even with Fragile. Some really excellent stuff, but also some material that just doesn't land, some less than others. Overall, though, if you're a Yes fan, give True a listen. I'll go out on a limb and say this is the best Yes album since the 70s, and John and the Band Geeks are a better Yes than the band currently operating under that name. If you've already listened to this album, I'd love to hear what you think. Am I completely out to lunch? Let me have it in the comments. Also, smash like if you up, and please hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. Now that this minor derailment of my plans has passed, I don't anticipate any other new releases demanding my attention in the next week. I should be back on Wednesday with my bass performance of a classic 80s metal tune. See you then. Steph out.